Joined now by Dustin Dopirak from the Bloomington Herald-Times. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure. Nice calm weekend, as always in college basketball. It's just a joke. Some great upsets, some great Indiana, being close to Purdue at Purdue. Like I said in the last segment, I would have lost everything. I would not have thought that they would have been able to be within 10 at Mackey. And that was a great game throughout. You've got other games, upsets. As we head down the stretch here, it's been a perfect pre-tournament season as the upsets flying. Indiana's women's team in the Big Ten tournament championship yesterday. Unfortunately, they can't get that done. Iowa is able to get that accomplished, but Indiana's women's team will still have a nice seed in the NCAA tournament coming up. So now it's all talk. What can the men do? What can they do to get through this Big Ten tournament? And what will it take for them to get into the NCAA tournament? And I keep changing my thoughts on it, Dustin, and I'm down to, I think if they can beat Michigan, I don't think they have to beat Illinois to get in. I could be wrong as rain, but I think if they can get by Michigan, that will be enough for Indiana to get into the tournament, but we'll see.
I mean, I feel like the bottom line on that is it's a moving target.
Yes.
Basically, because I mean, they can, if the stars align, beating Michigan might be enough. And tell you the truth, I mean, and I know this is a dumb reason to think this, but just the fact that I know Lenardi doesn't know everything, and he's not the even the most accurate guy. He's the guy that's on ESPN, and that sort of changes the calibration for what he does. As some people pointed out to me over this weekend, like sometimes he'll keep a team like an Indiana in the discussion because it's Indiana and it keeps people reading. It's more interesting to know where you're going to put Indiana than it is to know where you're going to put SMU or something like that. So that might kind of inflate my idea of how good of a chance they would have if they beat a Michigan, but it sounds possible at this point. After they lost to Purdue, my total thought was they need to win two. That winning one isn't going to be enough, and that's going to leave them out. And I don't know that that's right. Now that being said, I still don't know that that's wrong. I mean, it all depends on what happens in other tournaments. Other teams that are on the bubble are going to make a case. I think they came out of it in pretty good shape from, not that these are over, but from the early tournaments, from the smaller conference tournaments, you dodge a couple bullets there. The Valley's only going to get one. In Loyola, basically, I think that obviously helps the cause with Northern Iowa losing early in that, and those guys not making a push, and Loyola not being a potential at-large bid or anything like that. That helps your cause. Murray State obviously rocking through the OVC and not having a slip up there helps the cause. So those were and BYU, I think, going down. BYU is obviously another bubble team. Those guys getting beat, I think, in the quarters by San Francisco. All those things help. Now, but it's now up to a whole bunch of other major conferences to make their case. And just as Indiana can do something by beating a Michigan or beating an Illinois in the second round, there's opportunities for other teams, for an Oregon or someone like that, to make a better case in their conference tournament. And obviously the other teams in their league, I think Memphis beating up on Houston doesn't help. Memphis, I think, makes a better case for themselves. Rutgers, coming in, obviously having just beaten Indiana, beating Penn State, not having a slip up at the end there doesn't help Indiana's cause. But Michigan is on that border too. And so if Indiana were to beat Michigan, maybe that does it. It's going to be close. I mean, you want to beat Illinois to be safe, and I think you feel worse about beating Illinois than you would feel about Wisconsin, only because Indiana managed to play Wisconsin close twice, but Wisconsin is still Wisconsin. Indiana finds a way to lose in Big Ten tournaments to Wisconsin. So that's
Indiana's unfortunately found a way to lose too many games that were close.
Oh, sure.
And that's another sticking point and man, you could point to so many times you could just shut your eyes almost and throw a dart and hit a game that they could have won easily, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Sure.
And which again,
further specific darts. You can throw some very specific darts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You could throw some. I did this last week. You can throw some specific darts and put this team in the top 4 of the conference like that.
Sure.
Which is mind-boggling because they're not a top 4 team, but you could have done it in this season.
If they got, I mean, if they got them all together, and a couple of them is you just don't have any business losing to, Penn State and Northwestern. Obviously, Northwestern was very specific circumstances, and we're never. I don't. That's one that we're going to talk about for a long time, as far as that's concerned. I mean, the long term, that is something that's going to, I think, long term determine Mike Woodson's sort of future. I think if I mean, there's still a payoff to be had for that. I think is something to be said there, that the the discipline matters. It's important. It could matter years from now, and it might be the reason Mike Woodson still has a job, but it might also be the reason Mike Woodson doesn't if they don't win. So that's going to be still a very interesting sort of long-term study into the long-term effect of that move. But yeah, no, I mean, you give them Northwestern and Penn State, just two teams they should beat, then they're safe. Probably at this point. But yeah, if you give them, the two Wisconsin games, if you give them, if you give them Purdue, if you give them Ohio State on the road, we're having a much different conversation about this team.
How much, though, have they improved since that Northwestern game? I mean, Xavier, I was just talking with Don Fisher in the previous segment, and he wanted to really talk about his last 8 games. I'm like, it's all, everything is almost since that Northwestern game. Xavier has really gotten his focus into where it needs to be as a point guard and as a de facto leader. Not that it should have been his responsibility to be a leader on a team he transfers into. You shouldn't have to have that. That Trace Jackson Davis should have been stepping up and being the leader, but no one was. But for as good as I can see, X is trying to do that now at the back end of this season, but it's all post Northwestern to me. Everything is post Northwestern. They've come together a little bit. They played a lot better. Not enough, but it's been better.
Yeah, I mean, X in particular, I think, had to hit a valley and then come back up. I mean, that was Northwestern was kind of the beginning because he'd been playing well. He had a not great game against Illinois. Like statistically, it looked good. But that was when Mike Woodson called him out and said, he didn't get us into anything tonight. And then he's one of the suspended 5 against Northwestern. And he wasn't great the next couple. I think really the turning point, the game where it turns for him is Ohio State on the road. Because that game was all over the place. I think that was when he was 3 of 12. He had 5 turnovers in the first 10 minutes. Really, when he comes back in that game, since then, I mean, he still had some wild ones, and obviously, I think he had a couple misses at the end. But his good stuff in that game, he builds on. I think that was really the one where he really got going. I mean, I think he had some messiness. He didn't have a good Wisconsin game. I don't recall. I think he had some bad numbers in the Wisconsin game, too many turnovers in that one. I think he had too many turnovers against Michigan State. But I think really after Ohio State was when, Finney, Galloway, and Lander were all out. And I think he came into that knowing he had to stay in. And I think he was surprised that he got pulled. Basically after he had too many turnovers early and he got in a little bit of foul trouble himself, and they put Parker Stewart running the 1. I think he was surprised that he got pulled because there wasn't another option at point guard, and they just said, well, we're just going to put Parker there. We'll put names in a hat, pick somebody out, and make them the point guard because you need to come off the floor. And after that, I mean, he didn't have a turnover the rest of the game. The only turnover he had was a technical foul he had when he was reaching underneath EJ Liddell's leg to try to steal the ball, which is still a kind of weird thing that we just kind of moved on from. Nobody really wants to know X, what were you trying to do there? But he's really been phenomenal since. I mean, I think that was a moment where he started to really find it. I mean, and I wrote a big piece on X about how it really is about slowing down to a point where he's playing only fast enough that he can make decisions, but he knows his speed. He is aware that it's a trump card for him, but he doesn't try to kind of overuse that and play faster than he can think. And he is thinking as fast as he's moving now. And I think that's making such a big difference because he's doing a great job of finding teammates. He's a great job of not only getting guys involved, but knowing when to get them involved, knowing where they want the ball, knowing where they need the ball, where they can make shots. It's been just, I mean, really phenomenal. I mean, his assist numbers are off the charts lately. Turnover numbers are down. He's scoring. Really, I mean, I think got his shot right after that Ohio State game. It's interesting because he just has a funky one. It's not the most pretty mechanical thing coming off. It's just sort of push shotty looking thing. But it can go, and it has lately. I mean, I think there's more arc on it, and he's scoring at 3 levels. I mean, I think that's one thing that's really important to note. I mean, you really didn't see a mid-range shot from him early, but he's hitting that shot where you come off the curl and you don't see anybody in front of you, so you just you have space in front of you. There's a big man dropping or whatever, and he knows when they're hitting in the mid-range, and he's hitting the mid-range. And you're not just the 3, but that too. And really, Indiana hasn't had a reliable 3-level scorer all year. That makes him a lot better. He's passing a lot better. He's playing with a lot. He's leading well, but you're supposed to as a point guard, though, too. I mean, that's another piece. Whether you're a transfer or not, when the ball's in your hand, you got to lead. So he's doing all that.
Going to say Indiana has not had someone in that mid-range period, even the wings, where you could really take some pressure off of. That would take pressure off both of the inside and the outside guys, and they just haven't had that in any way consistently. Here of late, I've seen Miller Kopp try to make whatever the offense changes they've made. You can see that there's a little more action, a little more motion. But still, the mid-range is something I haven't seen them take advantage of a lot this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's the mid-range is obviously just a fascinating discussion within basketball at the moment anyway, because it's, the analytical idea is that a long 2 is a bad shot. It's an inefficient shot, but for specific reasons, it's useful. At various periods, it's particularly useful for a point guard coming off a ball screen. I mean, it is a particularly useful play because you see Chris Paul run that all the time. In Phoenix, I mean, that's just such a big part of his game. When it's just making that pick and roll more dangerous, having another option off of that, and X being able to do that is a big deal. But it's also just the general ability to create your own shot. I mean, I don't know where the numbers are at now, but Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart, like their threes, they're almost like they're like 90% assisted. Something like that. Not 90% are catch and shoot, somewhere in that range. It might be a little bit down from that. I haven't checked it in a little bit, but the last time I looked at it, an overwhelming majority of their 3-point shots are assisted, and same deal. They have a couple of 2-pointers where they've come off and sort of attacked a closeout and got a couple feet in and knocked one down, but they don't run a whole lot of ball screens for those guys. And it's because they don't create a lot off the dribble. And so there's reasons why they're not taking a lot of 2s, but they're also just not. That's just not been part of their game, part of their bag. They're not breaking a lot of guys down off the dribble and getting closer in and then pulling up. Miller Kopp does some. Parker Stewart doesn't do a whole lot. And Tamar Bates would have been that guy that really did all of that. And he hasn't just hit a lot of shots in general. And that's what his game is. But it just hasn't translated to this point. When he has scored, you've seen it all. But it's just I mean, you don't want to fall in love with long range 2s, but in specific circumstances, it's a weapon, and it's one they just haven't used. And Johnson getting to it makes a difference. It does take some pressure off, but it does really on that pick and roll force you to defend him everywhere, whether he wants to pop back off of it, whether he wants to come a couple feet in and take, or whether he wants to go to the rim. It makes it harder for pick and roll defense to know what you're going to do and decide how you're going to defend it.
Ed asks, how does Nebraska go to Wisconsin and beat them? Which also you can add Ohio State to that. They go to Ohio State and Nebraska and get a win. Part of that's the craziness of the Big Ten. And part of it, I'm going to say, is those teams were not preparing for Indiana. They were preparing for Nebraska, who I'll be honest with you, if Charlie Miller was here, he'd probably say the same thing, but they don't give the same credence to those teams. I don't think. I know that there's the every game is important. That's bull crap. When you're an athlete, you get into your mind who's good, who's not good, and it does affect you. And I think it affects the preparation. And I think that they seen some of the players sometimes see Nebraska as Nebraska, and it bit them in the butt because they were getting better at the end of the year, good enough that they could go on the road and beat Ohio State and Wisconsin, 2 of the top teams in the league, on the road. So it's a great question, but
I mean,
I don't have an answer.
I didn't watch that game. We actually, my wife and I actually went to the women's game to the Big Ten final, so I missed some of the sort of middle, like mid-afternoon games yesterday. I just saw that score and I was like, what? But I mean, the one thing about Nebraska, for as bad as they have been as a team, they got two real weapons in Verge and McGowan's. And McGowan's apparently, I'm just looking at the box score. McGowan's wasn't good at all, but Verge went off. 26.6 assists. I mean, that's a game right there. I mean, that's getting after it. So I don't know who let that guy go, but you knew. I mean, like, obviously when Indiana played Nebraska, I mean, like when you had to kind of look at them and have a sense of what they had. Virgin McGowan's are real deal pieces. It's just after that, there's not a whole heck of a lot. But the Walker kid was 7 for 11. He had 15. CJ Wilcher has 10. I mean, that's a guy that's not supposed to burn you, but Verge going off for 26. That's not crazy. Like he's and that's been the case. I mean, Nebraska the last few years, like they've been a mess. They almost always have a guy that you got to pay attention to. That's a real pain to try to cover. They usually don't have a complete team. Their roster tends to fall apart, through the year, and that's through Miles and Hoiberg and whatever. I mean, they've been the same kind of mess the last 4, 5, 6 years. But they usually have one or two guys that you got to be worried about. And in this case, it's they got both the McGowan's guys. I don't know if Bryce played. Yeah, Bryce McGowan's didn't play, so I don't know if he's hurt or whatever. I mean, I haven't been following Nebraska that closely because they've been at the bottom of the league. But Alonzo Verge is a tough cover, man, and like you've seen him burn some guys before, and so that's that's what must have happened against Wisconsin is that Verge went off and nobody really covered him, and they just didn't figure him out. So and they must have defended pretty well too. I mean, Nebraska shot 44% from the field. That's nuts. Davis only got 4 shots. Davis must have been in foul trouble or something, or must have got hurt. He only played 11 minutes, scored 10 points. I don't know what went on there. So I don't know that. I'm just looking at the box score and it's a clearly weird game, but weird stuff happens. And, in this league, anything can happen. And as bad as Nebraska is, every once in a while they can pop up and beat somebody. And Wisconsin happened to be that team, and that it cost them a 1 seed.
Yeah, and Nebraska had nothing to play for. I mean, they had nothing to lose. So It's a lot easier to be more relaxed going into that. Now we're heading into the Big Ten tournament this week. Indiana has a chance for second life. I don't know. They haven't shown me enough. If they can win, if they only have to win one game and get in, I think they can do that. But if it's truly that they need to beat Michigan and Illinois, they haven't shown me yet that they can beat two teams like that back to back, that they can stay focused enough to do that. Not that those teams are not beatable. Michigan definitely is. Illinois definitely is. But both, I think that the challenge gets higher each day with those games. But it's a tough road for Indiana, and whether they get in or not is again in their hands. But I just don't see them winning 2 games in this tournament. Not to be a downer, but hey, they can. It's not that they can't. That's why they play the games. But The first one up is Michigan, and Michigan just wins a game without Hunter Dickinson.
On
a big game without
Ohio State.
So a big game. So that's not a good sign either. But that's what's next up for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, no, I mean, it lines up with 2 of their worst games this year. Basically, like there have not been many times where they've just gotten dusted. They've usually been able to at least turn everything into a game, but Illinois and Michigan dusted them. Michigan. I mean, obviously, Indiana was coming off the Purdue win, and you could see a hangover there when they played Michigan the first time. But like Michigan's talented, and it took them a while to get going. But when they and there is some hit or miss with them because it's a lot. They're a lot more dangerous when they hit threes than when they don't. And they don't always hit them. But when they can spread you out and knock down some shots, and Dickinson can still beat you in the middle, they can blow you out. And that's obviously what happened at Assembly Hall after the Purdue game. So Michigan can go ahead and Michigan can bust them, big time. They could easily go into that game and not just lose, but lose badly. So that is a tough one. That's not an easy one at all. And like you mentioned, I mean, they just beat up on Ohio State, on the road. I mean, I think, Indiana's a better defensive team than Ohio State. They didn't look at in the first Michigan game. But so Ohio State, I mean, defensively, their numbers are not great. So that's kind of an explanation for how that went down. But they got going. They got 8 threes in this game. Diabate was a problem. He had 14. Jones was an issue. He had 21. And so they're looking pretty good. It's going to be an interesting deal because I think Howard gets back. Juwan Howard gets to coach this team again after the Wisconsin fracas, the swing at the assistant.
Which affected them none. It may have helped them, to be honest with you, because Phil Martelli has been a freaking coach for 1,000 years.
Yeah, when you can put your head coach down and you can just say Phil Martelli, you're in charge. There's
fine. A guy who's won 3,000 games. Go ahead and take over.
Yeah, you're all right. You're going to be okay. That's not going to kill you. He's going to be able to, he knows what to do. He knows when to call timeout. He knows how to draw up plays. I mean, that's not the worst situation for a team.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So yeah, they're fine. And so they're trouble. I mean, that's a tough assignment right out of the gate for Indiana. And so you tack onto that. Illinois, who they had problems with, and it's going back to, again, if they survive Michigan, which is a big if, and I would say, if you're putting lines, you got to favor Michigan by a couple of points at least. But if Indiana manages to pull that off, if everything goes right there, which I presume means Xavier Johnson going off, which could happen the way he's playing. But if they manage to pull that one off, then it's Illinois and it's Kofi, and dealing with Kofi is still. It's a problem for Trace Jackson Davis. And so, and obviously they can go bigger and put Durr out there, but that doesn't guarantee you anything. And, that just might even you out a little bit, but you got to find a way to score. You got to find a way to shoot with their guys, with Plummer and Frazier and Grandison, those dudes, and Curbelo and everybody. Curbelo's not much of a shooter, but they can spread the ball out and get the ball to the rest of those guys. And it's just Michigan and Illinois are the same case. They've got 3 or 4 guys who can beat you from 3. Indiana does not have 3 or 4 guys who can beat you from 3. They have 3 when everybody's clicking, and that's not frequent. So, those are 2 really tough assignments, and beating both of those teams is going to take a lot.
Absolutely. Make sure you give Dustin a follow on Twitter. It's easy because his is at Dustin Dopirak. Not many people can get their name these days just as their Twitter handle.
Not us, man. There is not many of us Dopiraks. We have the good fortune of being rare.